So next up, we have Peter Svarre, and Peter has over 20 years of experience in digital strategy and UX design. He's helping large organizations, but also startups to implement digital products. And Peter is also a writer in Denmark. He has been writing 2 books, one about social media, another one about artificial intelligence. And at the moment, he's working on a 3rd book, which is about designing digital products with the right ethics in mind. And that's also where his talk is going to be about. He will introduce the digital ethics compass and how he's using that together with different companies to help them to be more responsible and ethical when they are designing digital products. So Peter, please take the stage.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Peter Svarre, and I'm logging in from Denmark, where it's actually a public holiday right now. So I'm logging in from my summer house, which is why I may be a little scruffy, unshaved, as appearance, and I'm sitting in front of my Pulp Fiction summer house literature. But today we're not going to talk about Alistair MacLean novels. We're going to talk about the digital ethics compass, and I'll just share my screen. The digital ethics compass, and as it was mentioned in the introduction, the digital ethics compass is a tool which is developed by the Danish Design Center to help companies develop responsible digital products. And just for a little background, it's developed by the Danish Design Center, which is an organization in Denmark which furthers Danish design in all different kinds of shapes of design. And I'm actually not an employee of the Danish Design Center, but I'm a self-employed author, as it was mentioned, and consultant. And I've been working in as a UX designer for many years, but now I'm more like a digital strategist. And on this project, I've been working very closely with the Danish Design Center for a year and a half now to develop what I'm going to show you today. And along with Danish Design Center, we have a number of partners, companies, consultancies, non-governmental organizations, quasi-non-governmental organizations, a long range of different partners and experts within ethical design and so on. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. So why are we talking about digital design ethics? Well, I guess it's kind of a stupid question now these days, because we just look at a couple of recent headlines. A couple of weeks ago, we had Facebook exploding again from an ethical perspective. Facebook knew Instagram was toxic for teens, human trafficking, treated celebrities differently. So it seems like there is a Facebook scandal every second week these days. But of course, it's not only Facebook. A couple of years ago, we saw Amazon developing a recruiting algorithm that turned out to be biased against women, which is a perfect example of not ethical, unethical digital design. And then, of course, the scandal which kind of started the whole talk about the techlash, the Cambridge Analytica scandal with the data leak and misuse of data from Facebook and so on. So of course, one of the main reasons why we're talking about digital ethics is that we're living in a world right now where it seems like there is a scandal relating to digital ethics exploding all the time. And a lot of these scandals are revolving around a lot of the large tech companies, many of them out of Silicon Valley, but it turns out that these problems are relevant for all kinds of companies working with digital product development in all different kinds of shapes. So the techlash, of course, is the main reason why we're doing. The other reason why we're doing is that we're from Denmark, and Denmark simply just has a history with responsible design. We have going way back to the 50s. We have a furniture design tradition, which is very much about democratic design and involving human beings and designing furniture which is useful, democratic, affordable, and actually also quite good looking and nice to be sitting in or sleeping in or using in the kitchen or whatever. If you've ever visited Copenhagen or any other larger city in Denmark, you will also notice that the traffic is quite human-centered, especially if you like to be on a bike. The cities in Denmark, especially Copenhagen, is built around human beings, and the notion that traffic should be focusing on human needs, which in Denmark very much is about being on a bicycle. And then, of course, the healthcare sector in Denmark is also very much about being focused on human beings. So we have a tradition going back in design and service design in Denmark, going many years back, which is very much about focusing on the human, putting the human in the center, basically being responsible when it comes to design. So basically, the question that we asked ourselves when we started out this project a year and a half ago was, how do we bring this 100-year-old tradition of ethical thinking, Danish ethical design thinking, how do we bring that into the digital world? Because there is a lack here, even though this is something that has been on the agenda in Denmark and around the world, but especially in Denmark, has been on the agenda for more or less 100 years. We are not really seeing it in the digital world. We're seeing a lot of initiatives. We're seeing a lot of civil society organizations and government organizations working on these questions, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And this project is basically part of this work. So what is it? What is the digital ethics compass? Well, it's basically two things. First of all, it's you could call it an ethical design pattern or design heuristics. And secondly, it's a workshop tool which you can run in a company in order to improve the ethics of your digital products. And I'll just start with the first part, the digital design pattern. And you can see this model here. This is the core model of the project. And if we zoom in here, you'll see in the center of the model we have 4 or actually 5 guiding ethical principles, and the main guiding ethical principle is, of course, put the human in the center. And it's a little banal, but it's also, if you should forget everything else that I'm saying today and everything else that we're saying in the digital ethics compass, well, one thing you should remember is to put the human in the center. And the human is, of course, the full human. And it's not just the user of a product, but it's the user of the many different kinds of users that you can be as a human being. It's also the non-users, the people who are not using the product, but are also affected by the product, and so on and so on. So the main core about this project is to put the human in the center. But then as we move outwards in the circle, we're getting kind of more concrete. So we have 4 guiding principles, and they are it's giving users control. You should avoid creating inequality. You should try to make your technology understandable, and you should avoid manipulation. And if you are a designer or UX designer, or if you've ever worked with digital design or product development or product management or anything like that, you will probably look at these things and say, well, yeah, but I mean, when we're doing digital design, we're actually always manipulating. So digital design is about manipulation. It's also about taking away control from users. It also does create inequality and so on. So what's very important about these 4 guiding principles is that there are actually more questions than their principles. So it's questions, ethical dilemmas that you should ask yourself. So you should try to, as an example, you should try to, when you design a digital product, give users as much control as possible, but not so much control that the final digital solution, the digital product, actually becomes impossible to use. You should take away enough control so that the product is usable, but give users control so that they feel that they are in control. So very often what we use this for in the project is when we work with companies and work with their digital products, this is kind of a warm-up exercise where we use these as questions to make them understand that there's no easy solutions to anything. These are open questions, and they're meant to make people think about ethical dilemmas and ask difficult questions to their own products. So moving from there, these are kind of the 4 guiding principles. Moving from there, we're moving outwards. And the thing that we've done is we did a lot of research and asked ourselves, so what is digital ethics actually about? And there's a lot of talk about data ethics. And we have the GDPR, and there's a lot of talk about protecting people's data and so on and so on. But digital ethics is actually more than data. So we've actually split the area of digital ethics into 3 different areas. And the first area, of course, is data ethics. But the way we define data ethics is that it's everything which is related to all of the ethical questions that are related to when you collect people's data. How do you do it? Do you store them responsibly? Can people access the data? Do people actually own their own data? There's a lot of questions. We'll get back to some of those questions later. But this is all about data and how when you design your digital products, how do you design responsibly or ethically around data collection? So the other question, which is something kind of completely different, is about behavioral design. So these are all of the questions that you need to ask yourselves regarding dark patterns or nudging. So when you're designing something, you have the power as a designer to manipulate people with design. You can change the color of a button so that people will notice it, or that they will not notice it, and you can put writing in kind of little small fonts or big fonts. You can do all of these things, and designers and UX designers have really improved. I started working in the UX as a UX designer 20 years ago, and back then we had basically no clue about anything. But today we have all of this knowledge, and we have all of these data about people, which makes it possible for us to create design which is quite manipulative. So the ethical questions here are, so how do we create designs that are useful and easy to use, but that are still not manipulating, using knowledge about people's personal data, or kind of about how their brain works and function and so on. So behavioral design is the other question. So the third question is about automation or artificial intelligence, or whatever you would like to call it. So it could be called artificial intelligence here, but it's just such a fluffy term. I wrote an entire book about the subject, and I'm still not quite sure exactly what the term actually means. So we've chosen the term automation instead, and it basically, and it's actually quite a good word, because it makes us focus on the ethical questions surrounding everything related to the situation where digital solutions, digital products, automized systems takes over control or makes decisions instead of human beings. So it's the ethical questions are, so your digital product, is it making the right decisions? Is it biased? Can you get an explanation? So all of these questions surrounding artificial intelligence or automation. So basically, we've split kind of the area of digital ethics into these 3 areas. And the reason why we've done that is because of the next and final circle of the model, where we have a total of 24 different questions, which is actually, this is where it becomes a design pattern or a design heuristics, because the way this works is when you're working on a digital solution, digital product, a digital design, you can use this model, you can use these 24 questions to ask yourself ethical questions. So this is why they're all kind of written as questions. And there are 7 questions for data, 7 questions for behavioral design, and 10 questions for automation. And I'll just give you an example how you would use this. So let's take the example before. Let's say you were the designer designing the recruiting algorithm for Amazon, and you actually had access to the digital ethics compass. You could go, so I'm designing this algorithm here. Are there any ethical considerations that we should remember to think about when we're building this product? And yes, it turns out when you're kind of spinning the wheel, there is actually a question here saying, are your algorithms prejudiced? And then for each of as you can see, this is just a question. So is your algorithm prejudiced? Doesn't tell you a lot. So for each of these, there is what we call knowledge cards, where you can dive into what does this mean? What is a prejudiced algorithm? And then you can, on this knowledge card, you can learn about what are the problems about bias when it comes from machine learning, modern artificial intelligence systems, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you a little more knowledge about what is this. And then on the other side of the card, because you can print out these cards, and I'll get back to how you can do that, because you can do that yourself when I'm done speaking. On the other side of this card, we have a number of recommendations. So if you're actually designing a solution where this could become an ethical issue or an ethical problem, here are 4 bullet points to think about. And you shouldn't consider this as like the final solution to your problem of your design problem. It is like a design pattern or a design heuristic. This is recommendations, something to think about, but it's ethical kind of things or questions that you can think about. And then for all of these 24 questions, we have a bad example. So basically a company or an organization which has done something which is ethically questionable. And then we have a good example of a company or an organization which has done something which is ethically applaudable, so where they've actually thought about the ethical questions and done something from a design perspective which is more ethical than unethical. So that just one example. Another example could be, imagine that you're designing a whole hotel booking site, and your designers have come up with this solution, and of course it's not very aesthetically pleasing. It's probably not very user friendly either. But what about the ethical perspective here? Is there anything wrong here? Is there anything that we should think about from an ethical point of perspective? And there's probably many things here, but again, if we spin the wheel, there's at least one question that stands out in relation to this, which is the question about, does your design play with negative emotions? And what does that actually mean? So we pick up the knowledge cards, and what this is about is that design can actually use negative emotions and uses to create fear. And when you look at this design, the hotel bookings design here, what this is all about is about fear of missing out. The design is built around the idea that we need to scare people to do something right now. So we'll tell them that this hotel room has been booked 27 times. It's high demand, only 7 rooms left. Red colors, there's kind of signs of danger and urgency. You really have to do something right now. And if you don't do it, you'll lose room. So this is all about fear of missing out. And it's definitely playing with that negative emotion. So is that an ethical problem? Well, it's a good question, actually, because to a certain degree, it's all right to use negative emotions. Imagine if you were building a digital solution for an insurance company, or for an insurance company, you need to kind of build some kind of fear, telling people that if you don't buy an insurance, then things can go wrong. So fear to a certain level is all right, but above a certain threshold, it can become a problem. So again, recommendations, a bad example, and a good example here. So this is basically how, it's in very short, how the kind of the ethical design pattern, the ethical navigator works. But there's more, as I mentioned before. There's also the workshop tool, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I'm just going to show you kind of the overall look of this. Basically, the way we've been working with this is it can come in many formats, but the way we've been testing it, and we're testing it as we're speaking this fall on 9 different companies in Denmark. And the way we've been testing it is a format where we have 2 workshops of a total of 8 hours, so 4 hours and 4 hours. And it consists of these 4 phases: a preparation phase, which is very much about getting people into the mindset of thinking ethically, which is, as it turns out, quite difficult for a lot of companies, because a lot of companies are used to avoiding ethics, because ethics is all about being in doubt and asking difficult questions, and actually acknowledging that sometimes that you don't have a definite answer on all of your questions. And this is a difficult frame set to get into. So very often when we run our workshops, we have a preparation phase where we kind of build that kind of frame set or mindset, which allows people to think a little differently than they're used to. Then we have an exploration phase, which is where we typically dive into a specific digital product and we open the hood, the bonnet of the products, and we dive into it and we ask difficult questions. We do provocatyping, where we create kind of the most negative versions of our products. We imagine different stakeholders, and we do all of the things that people usually don't do on an everyday basis, and kind of attack the products from the digital product from many different angles. And then based on that, we move into the identification phase, where we have something called a worry storm, where we gather all of the ethical worries that we've kind of dusted up in the process, and then a diagnostic phase where we again use our circular model to say, so based on all of our worries that has been kind of dusted up, what are actually the problems here? And then finally, of course, there's an action phase where we try to come up with actual design solutions. How can we improve the digital product from an ethical point of perspective? So that's kind of the workshop part of the Digital Ethics Compass. And so how do you get started? Well, it's actually quite simple because it's an open source tool. The project is funded by a semi-public organization, and which means that it's publicly available. As I said, we're testing it as we're speaking, but we're testing it in a, I would say, 85% final phase. So it's almost done, but we have a number of tests to run. And then in December of this year, we're going to finalize the whole project and we'll put it up for sharing. But we've decided to already, because there's a lot of interest in the product. So we are already sharing what we have right now on an open source basis. Everybody can go use the tools that I've showed here. You can run your own workshops. You can use the circular model. And feel free to change it. If you do any change and use it for yourself, we would very much like some kind of feedback on how you're using it. You can, I've tried to make the URL as simple as possible by linking to my own website and then /SDN, or if you're really quick, you can scan the QR code. And on that page that you'll be able to access there, you can download all of the tools in the state that they are right now. And as I said, it's still a prototype. It's actually developed. We had funding for a Danish version, not an English version. So the English translations are all right, but not super perfect. So bear with that. And if you need any more information, if you're interested in guidance around these questions, actually to run a workshop within this area, feel free to contact me. You have you can Google me, that's probably the easiest way to do it, or Danish Design Center. The contact person there is Christina, who I've been working with for 1.5 years. So hopefully some of you will do that, and hopefully you will hook up with me or Christina and be a part of developing the Digital Ethics Compass. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter.